Hello, hello. This is episode 4 of Solidarity Side Chats, and my name is Meg Slay, and I'm also here with Trev Lewis. So, Trev, what are we going to be talking about this week?
You didn't even ask me how I'm doing. My
how
goodness.
Are you doing?
4 episodes in and we just dispose of the
care
pleasantries.
How you feel. No, I'm kidding.
It's like, at least take me to dinner first.
I know.
No, you're right. You know what? Why bother with it? We just got to get right into it because there's 3.
Getting to know people, asking how they're doing.
Who has time for it? Who has time for it? This is TikTok era. This is generation no attention span. We don't got time for all that. Okay. So, Meg, I'm doing great. I hope you're great as well. We're always great. We have 3 big stories again. Mm-hmm. I think we're liking the 3-topic structure of side chats. We did it last week. We'll do it this week. We'll see where it goes. Side chats. It's all about, casual, friendly banter about
a mix and match situation.
Mix and match of the top stuff this week that we think everybody's talking about, everybody needs more perspective on, particularly from the left, and that's what we're doing. So, Zuckerberg versus Musk. It is battle of the idiots with this story. The Maui fire, some conspiracy theories on what really started it, and our thoughts on the actual cause overall. Devastating, tragic. Meg, you know some people over in that area. And then last, we will talk about... what is the last one?
Feinstein.
Feinstein, age limits.
Yes.
See, I was doing a joke about memory loss and Alzheimer's. That was intentional. We're talking about age limits in the government. No, it was. We'll say it was intentional. Anyway, those are the 3 big topics. Of course, starting with Musk versus Zuckerberg, the quarrel that the internet cannot get enough of. One gigantic moron versus another gigantic idiot. It's the beauty of American capitalism, which is, of course, the best economic and political system the world has ever thought of. That
of course. Yes,
it's the best. I mean, does anybody who could dispute that American?
It's my fave.
Every American, it's amazing. It's wonderful. Who couldn't appreciate a system that allows 2 dipshits like this to rise to the very top and to control vast resources? And it's so efficient. It's so rational. Oh, we love American capitalism. We love Elon and we love Mark Zuckerberg. So anyway, these 2 gigantic morons are fighting each other, or should we say teased that they were fighting each other, and thus far no fruits have been born from the initial proposal. But by now most of you probably already know that they've been going back and forth on their respective miserable platforms. Elon over on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, and then Zuck. They both have annoying names too.
I know,
Zuck. He goes
Musk
by
and
Zuck. Like, he goes by Zuck. He's embraced it over on Threads, which is Instagram. I've described as Instagram's bad Halloween costume of Twitter. And so they've been going back and forth on their platforms. Here's the latest. Just today, before we recorded this, Mark Zuckerberg has finally had enough and posted 2 threads. Here's the exact quote. I think we can all agree Elon isn't serious, and it's time to move on. I offered a real date. Dana White offered to make this a legit competition for charity. Elon won't confirm a date. Then he says he needs surgery, and now asks to do a practice round in my backyard instead. If Elon ever gets serious about a real date and official event, he knows how to reach me. Otherwise, time to move on. I'm going to focus on competing with people who take the sport seriously. Now, this latest statement from Mark comes after Elon sent him a private text saying, want to do a practice bout at your house next week? To which Mark responds to him, I'm reading the text, if you still want to do a real MMA fight, then you should train on your own and let me know when you're ready to compete. I don't want to keep hyping something that will never happen, so you should either decide you're going to do this and do it soon, or we should move on. And then Musk responded to that text with, I will be in Palo Alto on Monday. Let's fight in your octagon. I have not been practicing much, apart from a brief bout with Lex Fridman today. While I think it is very unlikely, given our size difference, Perhaps you are a modern-day Bruce Lee and will somehow win. So that was their latest text exchange between each other privately, which then resulted in Zuck giving his latest statement of he's full of it and we need to move on. Elon, in typical Elon fashion of maturity and intelligence, has since taken to X/Twitter to further respond to Zuck's latest response by saying Zuck is a chicken. He can't eat at Chick-fil-A because that would be cannibalism. Can't wait to bang on his door tomorrow. Laughing emoji. So this is where we're at. Again, two of the most powerful, wealthy people in the world, thanks to the political and economic system we live in. These people are in charge of more wealth, more resources than you and I could ever possibly conceive. And this is the level of maturity. Now, Meg, I don't know how you feel about the most recent exchange.
I have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, me too. So between these two people, I will give Mark Zuckerberg credit for the fact that he clearly seems real about at least this. This dude, he does train MMA. He does want to do this. He's
been training since COVID, I think.
He's been training.
He has like a blue belt.
Yes, I think you're right. Something like that. Like, he really does this. And so people have explained, like, Elon really underestimates. This is Mark Zuckerberg's last chance for anyone to like him for any reason ever. He knows it. Like Facebook's reputation's in the toilet. Everybody hates it.
I could help him with that. We could fix that. We can improve the algorithm.
We have lots of advice from Mark. If he ever wants to hit us up, we'll tell you how to fix Facebook. Yeah. Meta, the metaverse.
On your platform.
Yeah, send us a DM. We're on Messenger.
Right, yeah.
The metaverse has crashed and burned so miserably. All of these things, the Oculus headset went really nowhere. I think a few people still have them. So, this is Mark's real last chance to be likable to the general public, which for some reason these two people seem to desperately want. So I think he's willing to really fight Elon, and I think he would embarrass Elon. Now, Elon, leading up to all of this, really is chicken shit, and he's saying, oh, he needs back surgery. I mean, we've all seen that famous photo of Elon Musk on the boat, the yacht. Like, this is not a dude who's in top form right now.
No.
And you know what? There's no judgment. I'm not body shaming anybody, but in terms of a fight, in terms of physical, like.
Well, didn't he say you would just lay on him like a whale?
Who said that?
Yeah, I think he did. Like, I think he said, I'm just like, I know this like move and it's called the whale, and I just lay on Zuckerberg, like.
I haven't heard that.
Or something like that.
Maybe that's what
I was like, really? Like, you think that that's going to win?
He thinks that, in Elon's messages, he thinks that just simply the fact that he's physically bigger matters in this situation. And it really
doesn't.
Delusional. He's delusional, but he must not be so delusional because he's not fighting him. So on some level, he knows he would get his ass kicked.
That's it exactly, because he can talk a big game. But then when it comes to the follow through and actually walking the walk, that's where he's dipping out. He's making 1,001 excuses. I fail to understand how it is Mark Zuckerberg's responsibility to take care of like Elon's practicing.
Right.
I'm sorry, but if like Elon Musk, whatever, we're confusing all of their names, I guess. If Elon was really serious, he would have been training this whole time since they first started talking about it. He hasn't. He's made a joke of it. He has never been serious about it. So the fact that he's now going and saying, oh yeah, Zuck is a chicken, that's bullshit. No, Elon's the chicken. He's the one that's making the 1,001 excuses.
Also, he can't come up with a good comeback to save his life. This is the most, Elon Musk is the most, I seriously think this, possibly the most unfunny person to have ever lived, like to have ever walked the earth. Like, I seriously think even some of the worst men in history, Hitler, Mussolini, I'm sure they cracked a couple jokes now and then that got the room going. like Elon, I think, is lower than the low of anyone in terms of humor, in terms of like relatability. He's just not. He does not have the juice in multiple ways in the scenario. Yeah. He doesn't have the juice to fight. He doesn't have the juice to fight on Twitter. Like, what were you saying?
Oh my God, no. What drives me crazy too is that there are so many like young men that actually look up to him and think he's like the prime example of what a man should be. And I'm like, oh no, 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 no,
No.
no.
Oh no. It's like a
No.
stupid TikTok
No.
song. Yeah, I'm hoping the mythology that surrounded Elon, which was the
Yeah.
same as like the mythology that used to surround Trump, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
same, like the way this goes, the playbook is the ruling capitalist class pays people at like Forbes or whatever to write these articles, like the Forbes, what is it, 30 under 30, all this stupid stuff where all these trust fund kids pay to have articles written about them. And so it's all this mythology. What was like that woman who did the fake blood tests or whatever, Elizabeth Holmes.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
famous,
yeah.
like same thing. These people, the thing about the ruling class is they're all frauds, like actual frauds. Like it's not just that they don't work harder than you.
Yeah,
Like they
just
the
know how to
mythology.
scam better than you.
Yeah, it's not even that they don't work harder than you. They don't work at all. They own things. Their parents had money. They have trust funds. Elon's family owned the emerald mines in apartheid South Africa. Zuckerberg, was born into privilege. He went to Harvard. And you look at all of these success stories, and they all begin with far more access and privilege than anyone in the working class has. And so the mythology is to keep everybody at bay and keep working people thinking that the American dream is attainable and that the people who are wealthy deserve it and you should never challenge their status in our society is, well, they're just smarter, they worked better, they're more clever, and that's the mythology of it all. And it's a complete farce. And anytime one of these dudes has even the smallest, magnifying glass held up to them, Trump being a huge example. Like before he entered politics, he was embraced. He was like, this businessman, you fired. There's this stupid reality shows. But then he ran for president. People started looking a little more under the hood, the Klan hood, as it were. And we saw the reality, which is a big moron who lied about his entire life and what he built and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
Elon is the latest example of a guy who has flown too close to the sun. And so this mythology that he carefully crafted over many years of having articles written about him and what an innovator is and lying about being able to get us to outer space in like the next 5 years. Look up any YouTube interview with Elon Musk from the past like 5-10 years. You'll see him just making the most outlandish, stupid claims. And in hindsight, it's obvious how dumb he is. In the moment, when people aren't really thinking that closely about him, they go, well, he's a billionaire and he founded Tesla. No, he didn't. And like SpaceX, government subsidies, like every layer of this dude's fake. And I'm happy. I'm sad that he destroyed what I thought was the most entertaining social media platform, but I'm happy that he at least exposed yet again the mythology of the ruling class for what it really is. And this fight between two dipshits of the ruling class, again, if you never saw Succession, for those of you, like the one thing I really loved about that HBO show Succession was it just shows you how cartoonish and stupid the ruling elite are, and just how dangerous that is, because they still do actually control the outcome of elections and everything, and yet they're a bunch of immature little children, like really little kids, fighting each other. Yeah.
I just have to say, it's really insane to me. Okay, like it takes a lot for me to cheer for a billionaire. Like the fact that I was like, I'm rooting for Zuckerberg.
Right.
What?
And not just Zuckerberg, Elon Musk over at Twitter/X headquarters, like having his stupid big giant X sign tore down and the landlord freaking out on him and then the cops showing up and demanding they halt. Suddenly Elon Musk has me just in these very specific contexts. I'm rooting for the landlord over at Twitter headquarters. I'm rooting for the police that are forcing them to stop like destruction of the Twitter sign. I'm rooting for Mark Zuckerberg, a man that I've despised for years as someone who has moderate success on the Facebook platform. I hate this guy and I think he sucks. And yet Elon Musk is so bad. I completely agree with you.
For all of them, cross board, anyone but Musk. This is like the way that I feel like about Duke. It's like a cheer for anyone other than Duke.
That's what it is. That's what it is. And so here we are.
He is the Duke.
He's the Duke. He's never going to fight. He's too much. He's truly too much of a chicken for real. It'll never happen. But I just hope he continues to humiliate himself. And sooner or later, I mean, this guy is going to, I just feel like he's got to implode. Like something, when you're dealing with this many people's money, there's like shareholders of your companies, like something's got to give. Something's got to give eventually. We'll see what it is. But that is the latest of Mark versus Zuckerberg. Let us know, do you think anything will ever come of this? Who are you rooting for, if any of them? Would you be willing to bet? If this was like a pay-per-view event, would you be willing to bet? I would bet real money on Mark Zuckerberg, I think.
Oh, I think he would win.
And if there's any angle we haven't considered again, let us know your thoughts. Meg, did you have any final things on that, or shall we transition?
No, I just I still kind of hope that it happens, because I would love to see Elon get his ass handed to him. But I think that that's why he's been making so many excuses and, oh, let me practice at your house. Just in case to see if I can actually just body slam you. Let me practice at your house in private where nobody can see me, because I don't want to go inside the Coliseum or wherever they're going to have it and get my ass handed to me and be embarrassed, because that's exactly what's going on with Elon Musk. So that's my final thought on that.
Well, with that being said, away from the silly news to something obviously far more serious, the Maui fires, tragedy that continues to unfold. The casualties, I believe it has already exceeded 70 people. Is something I read that.
Oh, it's 96, I think, right now. But then I was even seeing, this is super sad, and I haven't been able to actually look into this a lot, but people are saying that the death toll is higher than that, because they're pulling bodies from burnt cars and the ocean. And I guess there's about 1,000 different people missing still. So
tragic. And so, Meg, you have some thoughts on this. I know you know people that live in the general area, and you also were reading that there's some conspiracy theory being spread. So you go in whatever order you want, but I'll let you take that from here.
I'll say that I think I've said this in previous chats and everything. I used to work on cruise ships, and so I was actually out there for a while, and I saw Lahaina. And so when I found out that was gone, I mean, I was heartbroken, because it was such a beautiful town. And I'm so sorry for the whole community and what the Hawaiians are going through right now. I hope that everyone gets taken care of and provided for, because this is super heartbreaking. That said, I have some friends and family that are out there. They're not on that particular island, but within Hawaii, it's very close-knit community. And so I guess one of my friends that's out there was telling me that the Hawaiians have been talking about a conspiracy theory, and saying that, what was it? They were saying that the federal government has been testing directed energy weapons out in Hawaii. And it turns out that the Pentagon did earmark about $1 billion to go and start testing these kinds of weapons. So essentially what's being said is that the fire started because of these weapons. Now, I'm not really one to believe that, but I know that something that's being said is well, a lot of Hawaiians they don't really trust the government because of the history of the U.S. government. So I'm you know what, fair. I can understand that. But now this is something you and me were talking about, is that I have yet to see any mainstream media actually go and just say, this is climate change and this is going to keep on happening until we actually do something about it, until we actually have climate action. And so what was the article that I sent you, Trev, a while ago from Washington Post?
This ridiculous article from the Washington Post, which is, of course, owned by Jeff Bezos.
Our friend
interesting.
Jeff.
Our friend Jeff, right? Another one of those brilliant leaders and innovators of American society. Yeah, the Washington Post. This is an article written by Scott Dance. Maui fires not just due to climate change, but a compound disaster.
Yeah.
The fires were a textbook case of many different agents acting together. This is the brilliant insight by journalist Scott Dance. Oh, sorry, did I say Dunce? I meant Dance. Of course, anyway. The article goes, a scientist weighed the influence climate change may have had in fueling Hawaii's wildfires. There isn't one standout factor they point to. Rising temperatures likely contributed to the severity of the blaze in several ways, but global warming could not have driven the fires by itself. Maui is facing a compound disaster where many different agents acted together to make the fires so horrific. So,
What a joke.
as we all know, with climate change, it's not about variables and compounding factors. It's just the temperature rises and then it creates fires. And if there's anything else adding to anything or exacerbating anything, well, then we can't blame
like
climate
dry weather.
change.
Totally. Nothing.
Yeah,
that
it's just like there's rising temperatures. It's really dry.
Yeah, stronger hurricane
strong
winds. That's
and,
not a
like,
result of climate change at all.
This is so stupid. It's like saying, okay, someone froze to death, but it wasn't necessarily because
they were in
it was
cold weather.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily the weather outside. If you analyze their body temperature itself in their body dropped to a certain degree, and it's like, I wonder if their body temperature dropped because of the.
Yeah, why did that happen?
Stupid.
Why did that happen? And so, like, that's the thing that gets me, because so many articles are just basically saying it's the dry weather, the hurricane winds, yada, yada, yada. I've seen some articles that are saying, like, the non-native plant life also caused, like, the brush fire essentially to happen, I guess. And I'm like, literally, okay, aside from, like, the non-native plants, like, the fact remains that all of the things you're talking about happened because of climate change.
Right.
Like, the increased winds, the drier weather conditions, like, that fire just took off. And it's because of climate change. And for it to be happening in Hawaii, which is, like, what we know is, like, a very green, lush, beautiful, like, island. What? Like, that's just, like, insane to me. So, like, this article, not to just say, yeah, it's climate change, guys, it's here. Like, especially when we have so many reports about, like, okay, the surface level temperature of the ocean is higher. The ice caps are melting. The ocean's rising. We have all these heat waves going on. It's, like, ridiculous. I remember, this has been going on for, like, literally decades. For at least, like, over 10 years, I remember, like, talking about climate change people and, like, talking about, like, how worse it's going to get. And it's insane that, like, we're already past the point of, like, being able to reverse it. And why is that? It's because our government leaders aren't doing any actions. They're not making anything happen. And it's probably because a lot of them are actually corporate owned. And who owns the Washington Post? Jeff.
Friend Jeff.
Yeah. And so, like, with Amazon, I don't know what their carbon footprint is, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be really insane.
I'm sure it's good. Yeah, I'm sure it's so great.
It's just like, this is, why are we putting profits before our planet and even just people in general? Like, if we actually cared about climate change and had actually been doing stuff to prevent it from the get-go, like over 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 10, those, like, 96 people, or probably even more, would probably still be alive today.
But Meg, the shareholders.
Yeah, what about them? Yeah.
What about the shareholders? Think of the
Won't you think of the shareholders?
The record profits they were able to accumulate. When you really weigh, the benefits versus the costs, isn't it a small price to pay for a percentage increase in shareholder value? That's really what we got to talk about. The market. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. The real conspiracy here is the ruling class is willing to set the entire planet on fire if it saves them or makes them an extra buck. And any media outlet that is not telling you in full sincerity that that's the reality is a media outlet not to be trusted, and by no coincidence.
Or questioned. Hella question.
Yeah, certainly on the topic. And if they're corporate owned, you got to wonder, is there a reason this corporate owned outlet
is this news slanted?
Is
just
this a conflict?
Bit? Yeah.
And that's why you support people's media, such as Solidarity Media, a people's media company, not by the corporations. With that being said, I think that's a nice segue into, speaking of corruption and corporate influence, what is happening with the United States government? Now, granted, the United States government has not been in a stable place for some years now, but lately it becomes increasing.
Since its inception.
since its inception, but
Right,
lately,
only about like 250 years.
but lately the volume seems to be increasing. The circus seems to be getting more circusy, if you will, and Feinstein is hanging on by a thread. I honestly think I would feel more comfortable with Jimmy Carter, who is currently on hospice. I think I'd feel more comfortable with Jimmy Carter serving in Congress right
Oh my
now
God.
than Feinstein. I seriously think that dude's never going to die, first of all. But,
Right, yeah.
But I think he has his wits about him
I
more
love
than her.
Jimmy. Like, yeah.
he-
And like, I'm like, okay, I'm picking up what you're putting down, Trev. I understand. I'm like, but yeah.
And technically, by the way, Jimmy Carter could run again if he wanted to. I'm just saying, don't discount this man. He has defied all expectations thus far. Carter 2024. Anyway.
Yeah. Right.
But Feinstein has literally recently given her daughter power of attorney, which is something you do, Meg. I know you have more of a law background. Maybe explain to the folks like the implications here and why it's relevant to her capacity to actually serve in government.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, long story short, the best way that I could put it is that, like, say if Dianne Feinstein goes to the hospital and is like in coma and they need to decide whether or not to like unplug or, you know, anything like that, that would default back to her daughter. So her daughter is the one that's basically making decisions for her. Probably kind of similar somewhat to like Brittany and her dad, that kind of situation.
Right. It's almost similar, though not entirely the same as a conservatorship.
Yes.
But,
Very
similar.
Yes.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. I don't have anything else to really.
No, that was. I just wanted to summarize for folks in case, you know, because who knows? Power of attorney is a common phrase, but I don't know if people are quite
how
clear.
many people actually know it.
So the idea here is a woman who might not be able to make her own decisions is making some of the most important, is having an impact on some of the most important decisions for us, like in government, literally. And so the question once again has circled around to online and amongst.
Why isn't her daughter in Congress instead?
Well, the question is, what do we do about this, folks? Because this is not it. This is not the move. This is not the vibe. This is not how you build a sustainable, wonderful democracy, like all these words we throw around. This is not how the United States survives, or at least becomes any dream of us becoming a good and stable country. This is not how you would accomplish that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are saying age limits. There should be an age limit in government. Some people are saying simply term limits might be able to do this. Meg, we both asked our followers for their input.
Yes.
I'll let you start with your angle on this because you had an interesting proposition.
Yeah, so I kind of
things.
So my whole thing is that okay, you and me, we both supported Bernie in 2016, 2020, etc. And so for me, term limits and age limits are not exactly the answer, because if they were currently in place, then Bernie would have not been running. You know, like, what is the likelihood that we will have actually known about him? Now, that being said, what I know is that Bernie is mentally there. You know, he's sharp, he's with it. And I think he does have empathy for people. I think he actually cares. Now, I think that this is the biggest complaint that people have about what's going on with all of the, leaders that we have, is a lot of them are kind of borderline sociopaths, because they're taking a lot of money just to, answer the corporations rather than the people. They have no sympathy for their constituents, for their voters. And then the other thing is that some of them aren't with it. I remember reading a couple years ago, there was an article where there was a pharmacist that said that there are a lot of people in Congress that are older that are actually taking medicine to prevent Alzheimer's.
Right.
Or like lessen the effects or like delay it. So that means that like Feinstein and like Mitch McConnell and all of the older politicians, they're not like the only ones. There's probably a lot more that we're not even aware of, and they're hiding it. And that's very dangerous, because like you said, it's just like, how are they making these decisions if they're not fully there yet? So my question is that instead of going and implementing term or age limits, why don't we do any kind of testing on candidates to make sure that, hey, one, you're mentally cognitive, and two, you're not a sociopath. And now this is my idea. Okay. Obviously, I'm just the idea person. I'm just throwing something out there. But I think that this can be accomplished by any kind of neurologists and psychiatrists, because these people are specially trained to know whether or not somebody has cognitive abilities and has the emotional capacity to go and fulfill the office. And so for me, this is just one part of a job requirement. We already require our Congress members to be a certain age, to live in a certain location, and for a certain amount of years. So what is one more thing? Really? Why can't we go and add this stuff? And it would open up a lot more doors for people, because we're going to make sure that the good people, the people that like are going to care about the public, are getting in. Because this is the whole thing of, you're going to be serving in a position where you're like there to serve the public. You need to care about the public, and you need to be with it to serve the public.
Now, some of your followers responded to that sort of questioning, and I think some of them had some concerns.
Yeah. So I think that this to me is just a lot of the times, again, we're both like, left leaning. So I think a lot of people on the left can kind of spiral and like make a disaster out of things and like make assumptions without asking enough questions.
For example, let's pull up a specific example.
Yeah.
Nicholas Kierstead on your thread said, absolute non-starter. There's already a history of intelligence tests being used to disenfranchise voters, and this has all the same pitfalls. I don't care how scientific you make it sound. This is a gateway for pseudoscience and will lead to disenfranchisement of minorities. And so what was your response to that? Yeah.
So my whole thing is that, okay, one, he's talking about voting and like running, different things again. So that's like comparing apples to oranges. Now, like I said, if you're actually now with the voting tests, I don't know exactly off the top of my head how those like were structured or any kind of requirements like that, but that's very different. Like I'm talking about like having some kind of panel where people are actually evaluated by licensed and trained medical staff, neurologists and psychologists, that should be above, political affiliations, and it's just like, I feel like that this actually is a good solution, because you know what? I'm so tired of politicians not giving a shit about people. Like, I'm sorry, but if you have like 30 kids that get shot and they're like lying in their school dying, and you have a bunch of homeless people on the street that you could easily house, but then you don't because you want to take like real estate money or whatever, and you want to take NRA money. Like, I'm sorry, but you are literally a sick and twisted person, and I do not want you in office. Like, that's point blank. Like, I'm sorry, but if you're allowing kids to go and get slaughtered, you're allowing like just like people that need our help in our country, you're not helping them, you're not being that good Samaritan, then I don't want you in office, point blank. You're a sociopath to me if you're doing that. You have no morals, you have no conscience, you don't care. You don't care about people. You're like failing to meet the one basic requirement needed to go and serve the public, which is caring. That's really what it is. You need to actually have empathy for people if you're going to go and serve people. So, for me, I feel that like going and comparing this to like, oh, well, this is what they did with voting back in the day. Okay, that's a different thing completely, That is a completely different thing. And to not even just like go and say, okay, I hear what you're saying. Like, let's think of a way to actually make it work. Because that's the problem that we have with so many people today, is that like, okay, I propose an idea and you're just going to go and poo-poo it because, oh, it's comparable to something that happened, when was the voting like happening? I know it was like when was the last time the voting tests were being done? Do you know?
Well, they're referring to like stuff that was decades ago.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I just didn't know what the cutoff time was. But like, for me, it's just not you can't compare the two. You just can't. They're different things. And so it's just like, you know what? If you want to go and compare and be like, okay, well, this is what happened with this situation. How do we prevent that from happening if we do implement something like this? Like, why don't we go and find solutions instead of just saying no? Like, let's get a little bit more creative. Let's think about how to make things work. And if you're not willing to go and do that, if you're not willing to go and think of solutions, then what are you doing? Like, what? Just giving an opinion? Cool. Like, that's awesome. I don't know.
I like that. I like how fired up you are. I like it. I like how passionate. I have my own take on all of these different things. I'll offer my thoughts on the term limits and age limits, the testing, etc. I will say, in terms of the idea of psychological testing, my main concern is knowing what I do about psychology. Mm-hmm. I don't know that there is a clear-cut way to ever truly determine if someone actually is sociopathic or has sociopathic tendencies in a way that I would feel confident, not to poo-poo every idea, but what perhaps was it Nicholas was getting at is, at least in this country, we always have to consider, certainly the way it is right now, that anything you implement might be done in the most evil way possible. That's just reality. So there's a difference between, because I privately, we spend a lot of time defending some countries and governments that are less popular. People go for example, people go, well, we should have multiple parties. We need a multiple party system. The problem is there's 2 parties. We need 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 parties. And I go, you would think, but it doesn't magically solve things. And by the way, in Cuba, they have one party in Cuba, and that's called authoritarianism. And yet they recently just passed the most progressive legislation for gay people in the entire world. So they did it without having 5 or 6 stupid different parties with different flags. So things are often not what they seem, even if on the surface it seems like this is a good idea. You have to really implement. Well, one party would be terrifying in the United States because it would probably be a one corporate party. Yeah. But having one party in Cuba that passes the most progressive legislation for queer people in the world is different than the idea of having one party in the United States, which would almost certainly be run by like Amazon or Apple or something, So that's the difference between an idea and an idea in America, and why I think oftentimes Americans think that what applies to us applies to every country in the world, when other countries are very different and their governments are very different and not exactly what you're being told they are, et cetera, et cetera. So with regards to putting it in the context of the current state of America, I would say, if we tried to implement any kind of barrier to running for public office, it's going to be used to shut out the good people. And until we've fundamentally restructured the entire government, I would want to wait and pause any of that.
Well, I will
also,
say, because
I would want
Yes. No, you can go.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You'll say.
Oh,
what?
yeah. Well, because this is the thing that I know is that I think that so autism, for example, I know that there's kind of been some discussion about whether or not they have empathy. And it's just of course they do. It's just they don't show it the way that a neurotypical person would. Right. And so that can come off as, sociopathic in a way.
And so that's a danger. Like you said, that's a danger of disenfranchising.
Exactly. Now, but this is the thing. I expect somebody that's trained to be able to go and tell the difference between somebody that has autistic characteristics versus this person might seem kind of sociopathic, because they're 2 different diagnoses. There's differences between the 2, so that's my whole thing, is that, I can agree that maybe there needs to be more advancement in that so people can actually diagnose people better. But I mean, the person that comes to mind, and I'm not trying to diagnose her, or anything, but Kristen Sinema, is that her? Did I say her last name right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Sinema, yeah.
Yeah, because she ran basically saying, oh yeah, I'm a bisexual woman, yada, yada, yada. She would got sworn in. She was wearing leopard print. She would, at some point she was wearing a purple wig. I was like, you know what, this chick rocks, right? She seemed really cool at first. And then she got in line with the corporations, or at least it became more apparent. And she voted down increasing the federal wage, right? And for me, I was like, that is so just sick. Like, why wouldn't you do that? Especially, you know what? Like, if you're talking about representation, like the LGBTQ community, they make less money. And so with her being like part of that community and voting like against her community, that like ticked me off. Like, that's like, what is going on with you? You know, like, what is going on in your head? Like, do you just not have any morals? Like, do you not care? Are you sociopathic? Or did you just get bought out and now you just don't care about people? Like, what's going on there? You know, that's one of my issues.
And so my take on all of this in terms of why do we keep getting people who are awful in office, and is there any like clear-cut answer? Because I do have an unpopular opinion myself, which is that I don't think age limits or term limits are the way at all, and I'm strongly against them. And I want people to go Google what Ted Cruz has said about term limits. I want you to go look up, because he's wildly supportive of them. And there's a strong faction of conservatives and MAGA folks who are really in favor of cutting back on careerist politicians, and the right will talk about this. And it's seemingly one of the only pieces of rhetoric that liberals and conservatives will still agree on, both in private conversation and on these panel shows. And there's a real big reason for that, which is, yes, on the surface, it can seem like corrupt people being in office for a long time is bad, and thus if you limit how long someone can be in office, you can minimize that damage. On a very surface level, if you don't think about it any deeper than that, I can understand why a lot of folks out there, even progressives, could consider this a solution. Now, pop quiz time. Which president served before they implemented, the last president who served before they implemented term limits? Meg, who was it?
FDR.
FDR is correct. Was FDR a corrupt, evil conservative?
No.
No, he was not. He was a populist leader who had strong support from the working class and served was elected to, did not get to serve because he died in office, elected to an unprecedented 4 terms in the White House. Term limits were implemented on the presidential level to fight the will of the people. Term limits, by their very definition, are anti-democratic. Democracy is the will of the people being represented. And so if someone wants someone like FDR to be president 3 times in a row or 4 times in a row, why should that person not be allowed to vote for FDR a 3rd and 4th time? Democracy says that if you don't want somebody in office, you vote him out of office.
Yeah.
And if you want somebody in office, the democracy aspect of this is the vote decides. So setting an arbitrary term limit, 4 years, 8 years, because let's ask ourselves this. Which is rarer? A politician that's willing to do whatever it takes to enrich themselves, or a politician that's actually willing to serve the people? How many Bernie Sanders are there in our government right now? And as Meg said at the top of this segment, if we set age limits, we got rid of the one Bernie Sanders we have, and yet all these young people like Kristen Sinema and a couple of other young people that have been elected since are not it.
No, they're not. Because, I mean, like, the whole thing is that, for me, kind of adding to this point, if you're going to put the age limits, term limits, like, how many progressives do we have that are going to be able to go and foster that grassroots support every time? Like, every, 10 years. Like, that's hard. Especially when you're fighting corporate interests every step of the way. So you're telling me that, like, every, whether it's 6 years, 10 years, 12 years, whatever, like, that's the term limit, that, like, the next person that has to go in there is going to be competing against, like, probably a corporate, run candidate versus grassroots. And right now, with what we have, money wins. That's just the way it is. So more than likely than not, the people that are going to get elected in with the term limits specifically are going to be the corporate-owned politicians.
And here's the thing. Think of it this way. How many of you, working class young people out there, when you were first starting college or whatever, you start hearing a lot about these unpaid internships. And you were told, oh, if you take these unpaid internships, you can get connections and opportunity, and you need to start somewhere. But you said to yourself, well, I can't afford to, because I got to pay my bills. Who can actually afford to take an unpaid temporary internship? Rich kids.
Yeah.
So all the opportunity, all the networking goes to trust fund babies, Nepo babies who can afford to not necessarily have to pay their rent with the opportunities they're pursuing. What will happen to this government is it's already plagued by being a revolving door for the lobby industry. Kristen Sinema, she doesn't care about being reelected. She's going to go be a lobbyist.
Yeah.
And she's had I firmly believe she had her sights set on that from day one. She's going to crash and burn in Congress, sell her soul, and then when she's done in Congress and she gets voted out, she'll go and work on the other side of the aisle for the private industry and have a thriving career as a lobbyist. Why wouldn't she? If you implement term limits, if you make politics not a viable career path, you are shutting out the people who actually need a career.
Yeah.
The working class. You are shutting out the working class, and you are turning politics into a plaything for the rich and powerful and literally nothing else. You are shutting out the last vestige of any opportunity. And Meg knows this. She's worked in local politics. It's already near impossible for a working class person. For a working class person to run for office and gain those resources and that support, it's already, the barrier of entry is already impossible. And the reason a psychotic freak like Ted Cruz supports term limits is because he knows exactly what it would accomplish, which is whatever small decimal percentage of people in government that actually have honest intentions, it will make sure that those working class people can never afford to pursue politics ever again, because if you make it not a viable career, it's merely a little internship on your way to serving the lobbying and the private interests. It will never be seen. So the idea of attacking careerist politicians, you're not attacking Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi doesn't care about her salary as a Congress. Her husband is a literal venture capitalist. Nancy Pelosi does not need her government paycheck, okay? What you're shutting out is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, who relied on his government paycheck. Yes, now he has a couple of houses, but he's so old and he's one of the poorest people in government. They have a decent salary, and they should. But by getting rid of that salary, by getting rid of the idea of politics as a career, you are not getting rid of Nancy Pelosi. You're not getting rid of Kristen Sinema. You're getting rid of Bernie Sanders. And again, he's literally one guy in a sea of corrupt, worthless puppets. So do you really want to get rid of the one? And he's not perfect, by the way. I strongly disagree with Bernie on some things like foreign policy and imperialism. But listen, of the people in there, are we going to pretend like he isn't one of the most decent options? I mean, even many famous socialists and so on have recognized the difference between Bernie Sanders and the other ones. Michael Parenti, for example, who differed with Bernie Sanders, particularly on the issue of Yugoslavia, and yet Michael Parenti recognized, even as a socialist, the value of having Bernie be this visible and giving the ruling class such a hell of a time. And do we really want to get rid of that?
Yeah, speaking on that, actually, so I was on Twitter, this was probably about a year ago, and I was looking up how many times the word socialist was said, like prior to Bernie running in 2016. Socialism and socialist were rarely used. There was probably like about 100 tweets here and there, like every year. You know, it was
and they weren't nice.
It was only after Bernie ran that it blew up. And now everyone was talking about Marx. Everyone was talking about socialism. Everyone was talking about communism and whatever else. Right? And so like the whole thing is that when you don't give people that platform, you're removing that chance for movements. You know, like how do you expect somebody to go and create a grassroots movement with only, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, whatever. I don't even know exactly what the term limit people are proposing is.
And if you're watching
my
this
whole
and
thing
you're like,
is,
go ahead. Yeah.
This is my last thing, is that there are just some people that do make incredibly good public servants. And I have no issue with them running again and again and again and getting elected again and again and again, so long as they're doing the job, which is taking care of the people that they are representing. If they are doing that, then, and they are beloved by their community for doing that, and the community has, might disagree with him on some issues or her on some issues, but they're okay overall. I don't care. You know, as long, again, going back to as long as they care about their community, are representing them, and they're mentally there, I do not care if they're running for their 50th time or whatever. Do it.
Yeah.
You know,
and I think
if they were not loved by their community, the community would have voted them out.
And there's some, nuance there because Mitch McConnell, by all means, is unpopular. So the lesser evilism, both sides are gaslit into voting for a person they hate under the, premise that the other person's worse. And so, we're not suggesting that simply because someone's voted in a lot means that they are really popular with people, because there is a huge play. But what I am saying is, I don't think it's term limits. I don't think it's age limits. I certainly, personally, my experience, I don't trust psychology or psychiatry enough to do any kind of, I just don't trust it. And that's based on personal experience.
And it's nuanced. Like I said, that stuff is nuanced, and that's something where I'm like, it's an idea. It's not like a finalized
And you don't want to tune into a show where both hosts always agree on every solution. There's a little bit of variety here, and so I appreciate Meg's passion and willingness to think at least outside of the box of term limits and age limits, which people seem to think is a catch-all. No, what I am saying is the suggestions from those of us on the left in terms of combating corporate influence, that's really the path we need to pursue here. Publicly fund elections.
Yes.
Make it so that a working class person has the ability and can afford to actually run for office and pursue a career in government. They don't have to rally around a bunch of millionaires and corporate interests and fundraise and all this stuff. Publicly fund elections. Make it attainable for a working class person to pursue politics as a career through whatever options we have in regards to that. You fundamentally have to restructure elections and campaigning and capitalist influence on this government, which of course then we get into suggesting perhaps a different party and working class movement, as I've referenced before, and reapproaching politics altogether outside of this current two-party thing. But that could dive into an entirely new topic and video. But I strongly think, folks, for those of you out there, let's look more towards the how do we challenge ruling class influence on our political process. Let's not attack the idea of politics as a career. Let's not attack arbitrary metrics like age, like term limits. Like this is not going to fix what you think it is. You're dealing with symptoms, but you're not really dealing with causes here, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're not the root problem.
They're not the root. And so let's focus on the root.
It's a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
There it is. And we're back. Band-Aids don't fix bullet holes.
Bullet holes, yeah.
We're back to the Taylor Swift reference like last week. With that being said, Meg, I think we've given folks the full...
a lot to think about.
A lot to chew on. Do you have any final thoughts before we tune out for this week?
So I did want to add that I looked this up because I was saying, well, when did they stop doing the voting tests? Because I wasn't sure I was like, it could be the 50s or 60s. And so it formally ended with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So just a little fun fact, history fact for anyone that did not know that or just forgot, I did. That's one thing that I wanted to say. And just I think that one thing that I do want to say actually is that I think in the left, and this is probably also the same on the right, because a lot of people just hear something be proposed and they take it at face value rather than really thinking out the steps and trying to propose well, what about this or that or different solutions, and trying to really address the root problem. And so I think that's something that we should all strive for, is instead of just hopping on that bandwagon and saying, yeah, this is amazing, we're going to support this wholeheartedly, really understand what is being proposed and really think about how something is going to affect the environment long term. Because I think that the hindsight is 2020 kind of stuff is not really focused on as much. So that's all I have to say.
Makes sense. Well, folks, thank you once again for tuning in to Solidarity Side Chats. We will see you next week.
Yes.
And follow us. Meg, do you want to give the Patreon info, all that stuff as usual?
Yeah. So definitely follow us on YouTube. hit the bell button so you get notified. Like this video. We really appreciate it. It helps our channel. So we can go and like grow and like, you know, have more people find out about us. And if you really like the content that we're making and want to help us make more of it, you can go and support us on Patreon, which is going to be patreon.com/solidaritymedia. And yeah, that's about it. So thank you so much for watching and listening. And if you have any thoughts about anything that we were talking about, drop them in the comments and we'll get back to you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.